Should be on the top right.
I've started the recording now.
Thank you. I believe Arushi and Aditya have joined us. Let's wait for 5 more minutes and we should be good to start then.
The session is recording now.
Thanks, Aditya.
Chat is enabled for everyone also. Maybe we can send a reminder from Zoom also, Yashasvi.
Hi, Nisha, Devanshi, Aditya. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, Aditya had sent a reminder through Zoom already. I think we can start now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on Saturday morning. Briefly about Ashoka Horizons Achievers Program. We offer micro courses. This summer, we are offering around 15 micro courses for curious and ambitious high schoolers, which are offered by Ashoka faculty, wherein students get an opportunity to go to work on a hands-on learning capstone project with our teaching fellows. Today's webinar is specifically for 3 courses, which are psychology course, the neuroscience of well-being, astrophysics course, stars, stardust, and us, and biosciences course, life origins and synthesis. Today's learning circle's intent and objective is to give you a sense of how these courses would actually look like during summer 2025 if you were to join them. Additionally, they would also give you a taster of how your learning would look like during the summer as well. Moving forward, I would want to introduce the team members. I have been joined by, importantly, Aditi, who works with me at the Office of High School Programs. Hello, Aditi. We have been joined by Philip, who is the teaching fellow for astrophysics course, who is currently pursuing PhD at Ashoka with us with the Department of Physics. We have been joined by Aritra, who is teaching fellow for biosciences course, Life Origins and Synthesis, who is also a PhD student with us at Ashoka University in the Department of Biology. And the teaching fellow for psychology, Arpita Ghosh, who has not been able to join us, unfortunately, due to a health emergency. She would be teaching. She would be teaching the neuroscience of well-being psychology course. Who's currently an MSc student at the University of Bristol. And I would want to understand from all of you, where are you from? If you could briefly introduce yourselves, that should be helpful. I can see Ihita joining us, Devanshi. If you could put in the chat box, or that should be really helpful. Aditya, Devanshi, Ihita. Hi, Nisha. Great, great. So without further ado, I would request Philip to take us through his course. How does his course look like? And yeah, over to you, Philip.
Hello. Right. So, Yashasvi, can we move on to the next slide?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So the course for which I will be the TF this year will be called Stars, Stardust, and Us. And there are multiple learning objectives, but if I had to condense it into 2 points, one of them is to develop an appreciation for the life cycle of stars and the process by which stars grow and die is very important. It's the backbone of astrophysics, and it's deeply connected to the origins of life, which is something that Aritra will be talking about, hopefully, in his section. But it's also to introduce sort of high school students to analyzing real data that's collected by space missions and using this data that they can access themselves to get some small scientific results. How do you classify stars? How do you determine their stage of evolution? What can you say about the exoplanets that are orbiting these stars? And we do all of this using some hands-on coding activities that we will try to teach you. So you're not expected to have experience with coding languages like Python, but an eagerness to learn would be good. And at the end of this, you'll be able to make some sort of graphs and plots and draw some inference. So if you go to the next slide, Yashasvi. So let's ask ourselves the following question, which is, how do we study the life cycle of stars? So of course, the average age of a star is something between 1 to 10 billion years. So we can't sit around and watch them grow. So you can't follow them and say, okay, this is what's happening to this star as it grows. So what we actually have access to is a snapshot of the universe as it is right now. And since we can't wait and watch how stars grow, we need to know something about how they evolve. So I thought a fun example would be to ask a similar question, but for people. So let's say that you have a population of individuals in your country, for example. We know that people age, roughly 70 to 100 years. It's going to take them to grow up. And that's still a very long time. I mean, in principle, you can sit and follow them around, but in practice, it's going to be a long time. So can we look at a snapshot of the population today and draw any conclusions? Okay. So please feel free to answer questions as I ask them. You can answer them in the chat box and taking a look at that as well. But I'm going to ask a couple of questions and let's see what happens. So what do we do? So let's go to the next slide and we can look at what we do with a population of people. So let's ask ourselves the following question. If we were given the snapshot of the population, this is actually real data that we have from India. How do people grow at age? What happens as people grow up? Okay. So if you looked at the snapshot of the human population today, what physical characteristics are interesting? So let's look at it. We say, oh, there are people that are tall and short. There are people that are thin and fat. So maybe let's try and look for a correlation between a person's height and a person's age, or a person's weight and a person's age. And that will tell us how their height or their weight changes as they grow in their age. Okay, so remember, we're not following anybody in the population. We're looking at how the population, these values change. So can anyone tell me what the graph on the left that's there that says height versus age, what do you think that's actually telling us? Does anyone want to answer that? Any big ideas? What you see? Okay. So while I'm waiting for answers, let me tell you what I think you can see. Well, so it's not really that they they grow in height with age. But what we're seeing is that if we look at people around 10 years old, then there's a range of possible heights that they could have. But that range is roughly around 125 to 150 centimeters. So as people increase in age, someone has answered, Devanshi has answered, the height initially shoots up and then begins to stay constant. That's true. So if we look through the population, if we look at the ages of different people, we'll see that as people are very, very young, their height is usually very low. And as they grow older and older, this height starts to increase almost like a straight line. And then after a certain point, something interesting happens, and that people stop growing in their height after a certain age, right? And the same thing is true for weight. And you can see very similar sort of distribution here, that as people grow with their, as people age, their weight also keeps increasing, more or less like a sort of straight line. But after a certain point, somewhere around 18 to 20, their height and their weight both seem to be more or less constant. And this, so if you were an alien coming to the Earth and looking at the population of people on the Earth and you don't want to wait for 100 years to see what's happening, this could say, okay, lots of changes happen in people up to the age of around 20, and post that certain things are frozen in. Okay, so that's an interesting result. And we're doing this not by actually watching people grow, but by taking a snapshot at a single instant of time. So now we can ask ourselves more interesting questions. Sure, this is just a question. Aditya's question is, for stars, we analyze spectra instead of height and weight. Well, it depends. We'll come to stars in a second, but let's just talk about people and then we'll come back to the stars in a second. So if we look at people again, there might be other classes of people in your population. So one question might be, so this alien who's come to Earth who doesn't know anything about humans might be able to look at people and say, oh, well, I can see there's a class of people that I would generally call men and a class of people I will generally call women. Doesn't matter what exactly these terms mean, but they clearly are sort of morphologically different from each other. So let's look at these same graphs, but for men and women, and see if there's any difference that we can draw from that. So Yashasvi, if we can go on to the next graph. So I take the same data and I repeat it for men and women, okay? And on the right-hand side, you see the result for men is the reddish line, and the result for women is the bluish line. Can someone tell me what this line is telling us? What these lines are telling us on the right-hand side? Any ideas? There's a lot of interesting data in these lines here. Even though they're for people and not for stars, we'll just show that ideas are very similar for stars as well. So this does show the average heights and weights for women. So this is heights, of course, average heights for men and women across ages. But what do you notice? What is the conclusion that you can draw? So let's look at that initial region. Well, that's not actually true. I mean, initially, up to around the age of 18, you'll see that both these curves look roughly the same. They look almost like they're sitting on top of each other. But it seems like the red curve continues to grow for a couple of years afterwards, right? And then we could and so for women it sort of plateaus out at an earlier age, while for men it goes on for a little bit longer. Of course, you should also be able to look at this region of the graph in between the red and blue curves, and you'll see that there is a huge amount of overlap. So Aditya, we can't actually classify people just by looking at this, but we can give an estimate as to where you will be. So if you are extremely tall, it's much more likely to that you are, if you're going probability wise, it's a chance that you're a man. If otherwise, if you're very short, it's a chance that you're a woman. But this does not mean that all men are tall and all women are short or anything of that sort. It just means that you can have an estimate for things, right? Of course, the point is that these are not definite conclusions, but there's something about these classes of people you can say just by looking at this, right? So this is all very, very limited data. Yes, as you pointed out, that's very true. And there is a lot of noisiness, there's a lot of overlap, but there's still something that you can say that says that these two classes are slightly different in their sort of biology. So now let's draw from this and go into the idea of stars. And we say, and as Aditya, you pointed out, we look at spectra. We don't just look at spectra. Spectra are one of the aspects of what we look at. We look at the light that comes from them, but we also look at how bright they are, where they are, and so on. So let's start asking ourselves, if we ask the same question, how do stars grow in age? Can we look at a snapshot of the stellar population today and understand how a star's physical characteristics change as a function of its age. But what parameters matter? And that's precisely the question that we had with human populations. Fine, we know that there are different heights, there are different weights, but what about stars? So for example, one thing you could say is location, right? You could do the same thing with people. You could say, where is everybody on the world in the world right now? And if you draw a dot wherever there is a person, you'll see that there are clusters. And these clusters would represent cities, right? And then you could say, oh, so this is one city. There's a group of people close together. Same thing can be done with stars. So on the right here, you see that I've drawn where stars are in the night sky, and that's just going and looking out at the night sky. And you see this band across the night sky here. Can someone tell me what that band is? This large region across the night sky, which is sort of slightly more dense. Any ideas? Well, I'll give you the answer in case anyone, in case you're interested. This is the Milky Way, right? So this is a cluster of stars that are close to us, condensed to a small region of space, at least in our night sky. And this is our galaxy. And this tells us that our stars, that stars in general, just like people are concentrated in cities, stars are concentrated in these objects called galaxies. But what are the other properties? So Aditya, your point was about spectra. Well, here we have brightness, we have other sorts of parameters. For example, there's something called the luminosity, there's something called the color of a star, whether it's more blue or whether it's more red. And these are ideas that we will deal with in the class. So if we can go on to the next graph. Well, the apparent brightness depends on where we are on the Earth. What we are talking about is the absolute brightness. So now in order to do a similar graph, we need to take similar ideas, like we did with people with heights and weights and so on. And then we can understand what actually happens to stars. So stars fall roughly into 3 or 4 categories. So there are main sequence stars. Then there are 2 types of giant branch stars, which I'm just going to join together and call giant branch. And then there are these other classes called white dwarfs. And so in this graph over here, this long, the long line that almost goes diagonally across the graph is what we call the main sequence. The right line that's on the sort of on the top right of that region, that sort of clump, is called the giant branch. And at the bottom left, you'll see this thin, small scattering of stars, this dusting of stars, they're called white dwarfs. And on the right, you have an image that I'm sure many of you who are interested in astronomy will be aware of, which is the idea of the stellar life cycle, that stars are born in these nebulae, which are star-forming regions. They can either be babies like red dwarf type stars, or they can be normal stars like the sun, or they could be these huge, super bright giant stars, right? And then depending on which route they take, which is based on their mass, you can see that they have very different life cycles. One of them could end up in a planetary nebula. That's the little ring right thing in the bottom. One of them could explode in a supernova and form another type of nebula, which is a supernova remnant. They could form pulsars, they could form black holes, they could form lots and lots of different types of things. And all of these exist on this diagram somewhere. And on the left-hand side, you see the purple lines in this diagram. And these purple lines, just like the height versus age graph showed that as you grew up and then you flattened out. Here you have these purple lines that show where you travel along these sort of certain tracks in this diagram on the left. And the diagram on the left is called the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram, and we'll be talking about it in detail in this course. And one of the things that you will do is actually make a diagram exactly like the one that's there on the left. You'll almost definitely make this diagram. And you will be using actual data from something called the Hipparcos mission. And then we'll do lots more stuff like this in the group activities. Yes, the Chandrasekhar limit does determine something of this. It tells you how large white dwarfs could possibly be. So that's basic sort of examples of the activities that we'll be doing here. So yeah, if you had any questions about the course, it's a 4-week course. We'll have 4 different activities once every week. And Professor Bhattacharya, who's taking the course, will go through a lot of the theory behind this.
Thanks so much, Philip, for walking us through how the course would look like and the interesting bits about stars. It really got me really excited and curious about stars. And I'm sure that the high schoolers would be looking forward to it as well. Thank you so much. Now I request Aritra to go over their course briefly and let our students know what is in store for them.
Yeah, hi. I'm audible, right?
Yes, you're audible, and we can see
All
your
right,
screen.
great. Yeah. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Aritra. I'm the TF for the Biosciences course, where the course is named Life, Origins and Synthesis. In this course, we will delve into two major themes. The first theme being obviously the origin of life, where we will look into what are the key theories and what are the evidences that support these theories regarding the origin of life. And we'll put a special emphasis on prebiotic chemistry. That is, what was the chemistry on Earth before life evolved? And how could that prebiotic chemistry nudged all the components on Earth towards creating life? The second major theme that we will delve into is to understand the principles of synthetic biology. We'll look into what were the challenges to synthetic biology, how did this field come about, and what are the really interesting breakthroughs that this field has seen recently. Interestingly, we'll also get the opportunity to design our own cells in this part. So to do these, we will familiarize ourselves with not only the classical papers, but also some of the cutting edge research in the field. Now, for Philip's part, the spatial scale, sorry, just a minute, turn off pen. Yeah, the spatial scale that you were looking at was in the range of light years. Now, to look at the origin of life, will have to zoom in quite a bit, and we'll have to move to the other end of the spatial scale and stop not just at the meter length scale, which one would assume would be true for evolution of life. But interestingly, we'll go deeper. We'll go into the nanometers and picometers length scale, and what we'll look into is the molecular origin of life. And to give you an idea of the temporal scale that we will talk about, it is in the billions of years. As we all know, the Big Bang happened, as we all theorize that the Big Bang happened around 5 billion years ago, and life is roughly believed to have originated around 4 billion years ago. So what happened at 500 million years ago when the Earth was created? That is roughly at 4.5 billion. So what happened between those 500 million years? What happened on Earth? How did the chemistry on Earth evolve such that life could be formed in those 500 million years ago? Now, there are origin of life, interestingly, is one of those fields that still has no definite answers. We have some evidences, we have some hypotheses, and people are trying to explain what they see, but we still do not know how did life exactly originate. And hence, I like to say that this field of biology, or this field of research, is dependent on a lot of interesting stories that people have woven using the evidence that they see. And one of those interesting theories or stories is, if any one of you would like to take a guess based on this illustration, what is it? And I don't think I'll be able to see the chat. Yashasvi, can you please let me know what's going on
Yes,
in the chat if anyone has any
yes,
doubts? So
yes,
yeah,
for
any
sure.
guesses on what this theory is? Yes,
Aditya
Aditya, right.
Jain, yeah, they
Right,
have
right.
responded.
Right. So the name of this theory is called the theory of panspermia, which believes that maybe life arrived on Earth on meteors as a spore. And so if this theory turns out to be right, probably we are the aliens that we have been looking for in space. Does anyone have any idea about what this schematic shows regarding the origin of life? Any clue? None? No problem. All right. So this is a really gross theory about the origin of life, which said, I think it was given by Francesco Redi, which said that life probably emerges from rotting material. Fortunately for us, pretty soon by Louis Pasteur, this theory was disproved. He used one of the classical equipments known as the Swan flask, which probably will look into during the course, and disproved this theory. Pretty gross, but yeah, back then anything that could probably explain mysterious occurrences of life was considered a theory for origin of life. But mostly what we will focus on in this course is the theory of abiogenesis. Now, what the theory of abiogenesis says is that biota or life on Earth originated from abiotic components. By abiotic components, I mean the chemicals that were present or different kinds of polymers that were present on the prebiotic Earth. So this is prebiotic synthesis is something that we will delve into. This prebiotic synthesis gave rise to polymers, vesicles. Polymers, as we know, if from as we know that in our body, the core of our existence, our genetic material, DNA, it is a polymer. The workhorses of our cells, proteins, again polymer. The energy sources, the carbohydrates, all our biomolecules, the macromolecules, they're all polymers. Without these polymers, we would not exist. So how is it that these polymers evolved on the prebiotic Earth? And the major proponents of this theory were A.I. Oparin and J.B.S. Haldane. And in this abiotic saga, as it can be described, and why do we focus on this theory alone? Why not the other theories? And it is this experiment that is responsible for us, or that provides a lot of evidence in the favor of this abiotic saga or the chemical evolution of life. This very classical experiment performed by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey was that they simulated the conditions of prebiotic Earth, high temperatures, high energy, which could be because of the lack of atmosphere and lightning, and like a very thin atmosphere and lightning reaching the Earth's surface, then boiling waters due to probably volcanoes, hot geysers. And what they did was, and we also know that the prebiotic Earth did not have an oxidizing environment. There was no oxygen in the environment. It was a reducing environment. So you'll see that in the reaction crucible, which is where the conditions of prebiotic Earth were simulated, there is a spark discharge, there is a gaseous mixture which has no oxygen, it has methane, ammonia, hydrogen, water. So if you just introduce all of the components that were present on prebiotic Earth, that we know were present on prebiotic Earth, you simulate the conditions of prebiotic Earth, and then you let the reaction unfold. What they then did was they withdrew the sample after some times of incubation. And very interestingly, when they analyzed the sample, they could see that prebiotic conditions gave rise to amino acids, sugars, these small molecules that are relevant in our context, in our physiological context. So this is one of the classical experiments that provides evidence that even in the prebiotic chemistry, if certain molecules came together in a certain proportion under some certain conditions, we could have life could have originated. What these certain conditions are is something that we'll delve deeper into in the course of in a 4-week course. So since this chemical evolution has more evidence to it than other theories, so we will delve into the chemical evolution of life. And what we can do now is, if you can all take a minute to scan this code, it will lead you to this website where we can simulate this experiment. So, sorry, I'll just keep the QR code on for a minute there. All right. Please let me know if anyone needs the link or the QR code again. But what you will see is this is the Miller-Urey simulation. And what they have done in this simulation is, basically they simulated the entire experiment, the charge, the lightning conditions in the reaction crucible, the heat from the boiling of water. And here in the reaction crucible, they also have a way by which you can eventually cool down what reaction is happening, and then you can withdraw samples and assess what is there in the sample. Now, you see that you have options to introduce hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, methane, and ammonia. What we can do is we can quickly introduce all of our these molecules. And I know that the limit for this website is to introduce 200 molecules of each. That is why I'm hitting the highest limit. You can feel free to play with the different proportions of these molecules. And what you will see is that when you vary the proportions of the molecules, which amino acids are formed first will vary. And even their the concentrations will vary. As so what they're simulating is the prebiotic condition giving rise to these amino acids shown here, and what concentration they'll be formed when the reaction goes on. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the concentration that they show is not the exact concentration. What is accurate is the chemistry behind this simulation. Now, you start the simulation, you introduce lightning spark, you introduce boiling water, you let the reaction incubate for some time. Now, if you had noticed, I mentioned that the early prebiotic Earth had a reducing environment, not an oxidizing one. Just for the sake of fun, let's introduce one oxygen molecule. We stop the analysis. Yeah. As soon as you introduce oxygen, the reactionary experiencer, you'll see that the reaction crucible will explode. So the simulation is so accurate that it will not even accept even one molecule of oxygen to simulate the prebiotic reaction. Now you let it go on, and I do some analysis then. Once you analyze that, now that the simulation has run for so long, I analyze what is going on. And you will see that different amino acids have been formed. Not all the amino acids have been formed, but some of them, so simpler ones like alanine has been formed, but not so simple ones like asparagine. You'll notice that you provided nitrogen. So it makes sense that what you can now go back and do is look at the composition of each of these amino acids. Just see if you have an amino acid that has more nitrogen atoms than than another amino acid, and if you want to see that, if you want to create that amino acid first, you can keep your ammonia and nitrogen atoms high, you can keep other atoms low. You can basically play around with this simulation and see that valine has formed. Interestingly, tryptophan forms. Now, tryptophan is an aromatic amino acid. It's a pretty complex molecule if you compare it with something like valine and alanine. But even that kind of a complex molecule forms. Mostly alanine, glycine, valine, the simplest amino acids, they are formed. But even in such a short reaction while, you have tryptophan forming. So it is fascinating how simply by providing some simple atoms, some simple molecules, and by modulating the temperature, modulating how much energy you provide, you can arrive at components that now constitute life. So this is just one small example of what we will be looking into during the presentation. Of course, we'll be looking into other simulations wherever we can find accurate simulations. We will be designing designing our own forms of life based on our understanding of what life is. So I'd like to give you a brief overview of what you can look forward to during the 4 weeks. In week 1, we will first look into the basics of biology, and we'll understand what is the scientific principle of cellular replication. If we know that one of the basic principles of biology is that omnis cellulae celluli. Life emerges from pre-existing life. So what it is at the level of the pre-existing life that led to new life forming, if we understand those principles, we can then try and figure out what did life need at the first point to have even been created. In week 2, we will look into what was prebiotic chemistry, what were the conditions back then on Earth, and how it could have given rise to new molecules that are more biotically relevant. In week 3, we will look and will introduce ourselves to synthetic biology. And also look into the nature of the earliest life forms, LUCA. LUCA, if you are aware, is the can anyone tell me what is LUCA in the chat box? Yes, perfect. So we divide life into different kingdoms, right? So based on ribosome, based on certain patterns that exist in ribosomal RNA, we now know that the broadest classification of life can be archaea and eukarya, but even before them, they had one common ancestor, and that is what we refer to as LUCA, the last universal common ancestor. In this course, what we will do is we will look into all the genomic or the final phylogenetic data available. We will build a phylogenetic tree and trace life from the modern forms back to LUCA. Finally, we will end with more principles of synthetic biology. We'll look at self-replicating biomolecules. And in week 4, you will design your own functionally specialized cells. So, which brings me to the end of the biosciences section. If anyone has any doubts, any queries for me, please feel free.
Thank you so much, Aritra,
All right.
for taking us through your course and what you would be covering throughout the course and would be covered during summer. It's really exciting to know how just a bunch of molecules and chemical reactions have resulted in the origins of life, and how it gives us it takes us to the possibility of actually creating synthetic life, which you would be delving during the course. Really excited. Um, really got me excited to know about the course. Um, Moving forward, we have covered the mind, we have covered the universe um, with the astrophysics course. We have covered with you how the human body has originated. Moving forward, because we do not have Arpita with us, I would request um, Aditi to take you all through what we would be covering during the psychology course, the neuroscience of well-being. Just allow me a second to share my screen. Over to you, Aditi.
Oh, thank you, Yashasvi. So, as everyone can see on the screen, the theme of the course, of course, is psychology, but the title is the neuroscience of well-being. In this course, actually, you will see a very, very different understanding and a very different side of psychology per se, where we will be exploring the really the interplay or the relationship between neuroscience, psychology, and emotional well-being. So how we do this essentially is we really get into the at the microscopic level of the brain, and we connect that to understand human behavior. So hence the looking at the brain, looking at the chemical reactions in the brain, looking at the models of a neuron, all of that is really a lot of neuroscience part, which then transitions into psychological part where it is about relating that to human behavior, relating that to human emotions, relating that to interplay of moods, etc. So, one of the very interesting things about this course is that you will see about this course is that what you will see is that you will actually practically simulate some of the behaviors, reactions, etc. At the brain level. So, for example, you will actually tinker and work with building circuits, or you would actually sort of use online simulators to create muscle twitches. So, all of that, then you will be able to understand that from those simulations, that how does this transfer into what happens in the brain, and how does this then translate into human behavior. So of course we have very interesting aspects in this course, which really gives you a lot of insight into how humans feel happiness or stress or emotional resilience, etc. How do we develop that? And really sort of understanding, also relating that to sort of some of the, I think, some of the psychological disorders as well, to understand that, how is it really a disorder, or it is just the brain functioning in a certain manner, and how it even connects with things like depression or trauma or PTSD, a post-traumatic stress disorder. So, and this will all be explored through simulations and live case studies, real life case studies from the professor and from Arpita, who's also going to be teaching this course. So, very excited to share about it. And of course, other extended opportunities you can also see on your screen. You will be certified. Some top students will also get letters of academic achievement. But one of the very interesting aspects of this course for students who perform well will be an observership opportunity. So you actually think of it like an internship, but more where your role as an intern is to observe. You will actually sit into actual calls with clients, with patients who have sort of any challenges, and you will actually observe how the conversation happens at a psychological level, what is the background that happens then from a neuroscience level. So top students will also get an extended opportunity after the course for an observership. So yeah, that's about it. I wanted to quickly share about this course, and super excited if anyone has any queries and wants to know more. Thanks, Yashasvi. Over to you.
Thank you, Aditi. Thank you. Before proceeding ahead, I want to request all the students, if they have any questions specific to astrophysics course or to psychology course, biosciences course, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. This would be a good time to ask your questions regarding these three courses. Okay, so Aditya has asked, so there will be any computational neuroscience in that course. My sense is, and Aditi would be, yeah, if you could take that question, that would be very good.
Sure. So I think from point of views of computational neuroscience, I wouldn't say that we will be using a lot of software based analysis, or using mathematical models really, but we will definitely be doing a lot of computer simulations to represent the brain. So that is something that we will be focusing a lot more on, to sort of understand. I think the focus from computational neuroscience, the focus will be on a lot of simulations, but not so much on mathematical models. I think we will be creating physical models of a neuron and of a neuron or the brain, which will be physical models, not computer models. But we will be definitely doing a lot of simulations on the computer, and I think we will cover that part of computational neuroscience.
Thank you, Aditi. Another student has asked, what will be the criteria for selecting the students for the letter of academic achievement or observership?
Let me
Yeah, please take.
So
Yeah.
I think, the academic, so here basically to make you understand is that every course, each of our courses has an assessment rubric, or basically a assessment matrix, to say that you have to complete these things to you sort of finish your course and get your certification. But each course has like a weightage attached to it, and if you perform well in the course, let's say if all your assignments, all your sort of discussions in class, all your project, everything is graded well, then you are sort of the top performer in class, top 2 or 3 performers. Then you get an opportunity for a letter of academic achievement and an observership. I hope that answers your question, Anji.
There's another student who has asked question, will there be any internship opportunities or certifications for the astrophysics?
So in the astrophysics course, there are no internship opportunities as such. With certifications, yes, there will be the letters of achievement will be there as well, again, based on the rubrics, which will be class participation and whether you submit the work that has been given to you over the weekend, after the project sessions over the weekend and so on. But yes, and the top 3 students there too will get the similar letters.
And to add to that, you will have an opportunity to get mentored by Philip also. There we do have an extended weekend on which is your week 5 of the course, which purely focuses on counseling and mentorship on the topic that you're doing in the course and the careers around it. So you will have an opportunity for mentorship on astrophysics.
Okay, another student has asked, I've already paid the fee, still receiving the emails. No, that shouldn't be an issue. It could be because you may have, your status may not have changed. But if you've received an enrollment confirmation, please avoid such emails. That should be, and it would be helpful if you could let us know who you are. We would remove you from the list of the emailer list.
Yes, we do have a question on biosciences extended opportunity. If you want, I can take that.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so Aditya, for biosciences course, the extended opportunity is actually not really an internship, but a very, very practical experience. Because in the entire course, you are sort of talking about how life originated, or early questioning, testing hypotheses around that, etc., and discussing that with faculty. And that's also going to be your project essentially, which you do on Saturdays, where the capstone project is to actually choose your own hypothesis and test your hypothesis around life origins. So the extended opportunity after you finish the course in the biosciences course is that you get to come to Ashoka campus and work in the physical biosciences lab with the professors and with Aritra to really do some physical experiments around what you have done in terms of your capstone or in terms of the question that you have. So yeah, that's I think that's the experience opportunity. I wouldn't call it an internship opportunity. And yeah, I think that's about it for biosciences course.
There's another question from Devanshi who's asking about the kind of assignments would be given in the psychology course.
Sure. So Devanshi, assignments in the psychology course will essentially include again your one of the core aspects is the capstone project, in which you will be doing these simulations uh, at at home also, uh, and basically choosing a topic to research on. So the course for new, I think the capstone project for neurosciences course essentially is that whatever you have covered in the 4 weeks of your journey, and whatever topics you have covered, you get to choose a topic and present your own research on any one of those topics at the end of the course. So that's definitely a core aspect of the course that you get to do. Which is basically one of the major assignments that you do, that you get to research on any of your chosen topic of your choice, and of course undertake, and so that will be one part of the capstone project. And of course an extended part of assignments is that you actually do undertake tasks, which are around creating the model of a neuron using clay or physically, prototyping a developing brain, then as I said, building circuits in online, representing muscle twitches online. So all of that will be part of assignments. One of the assignments will also be around a class experiment on emotion modulation. How do you change emotions and how that impacts the brain is something you will see physically. So all of that, all of these things are actually the assignments, and then all of it will culminate into a research-based capstone project.
Thank you so much, Aditi, for explaining it so by breaking it down, and that's really helpful. Aditya has checked with us. I'm more of a theorist, so will there be an extra theoretical stuff? Aditya, would want to know in which, like, are you asking in general for all the Horizons courses, or are you talking about one specific course? Okay, they're asking about the biosciences course. Aritra, it would be helpful if you can take this question.
Sure. So if just pertaining to the courses, whatever analysis that we do, that will fall under the umbrella of computational like biology. If you're interested in further theoretical for example, theoretical modeling in origin of life research, currently our lab doesn't perform any theoretical modeling, but we are planning to include that in our research work as well to better understand the answers that we are getting to the questions that we ask. As for the course, we will have some bioinformatics. We'll use several bioinformatics tools. We will phylogenetic trees and similar analysis in the course. I hope
Thanks.
that answers your question.
Thanks, Aritra. We have another question for astrophysics course. What kind of assignments would be given in the astrophysics course?
Right. So the assignments will be mainly on computationally looking at data. So we'll do a little bit of Python where we take data from different space missions. So they could be from the Hipparcos space mission or some space missions like the Gaia space mission, and we'll get data from them and we'll try to create plots. And from those plots, we'll try to extract conclusions that make sense. And then we'll start asking questions like, how do you classify stars by this family? How do you make that HR diagram? How can you say, or the Hertzsprung-Russell diagram that I showed, how can you say how stars evolve over time? We also do similar things with exoplanets. We'll talk about feasibility of life, for example. What are the criteria for life being able to exist in a certain planet? Can we take the data from all the exoplanets right now and say, okay, which of these could be potential candidates for life? These will be, to some extent, baby projects. We won't be doing full-time research, but they will introduce you to the same sorts of ideas that people use in real research, the same fundamental notion.
That's helpful. Thanks, Philip. I believe we can take one or two more questions. Please feel free if you have any questions, let us know. Great. I believe we can move forward quickly. Thank you, everyone. So these are some of the courses that we are offering in the upcoming summer. 15 courses to be precise, across different disciplines, different skills as well. Feel free to check out our course catalog. Aditi, I would request if you can drop in the link to our website. Some important dates for you. The programs will start on 17th of May and they would end by June 14th. Our final application deadline is 4th of May. So if you are keen to join the program, the applications are still open until 4th of May. We really appreciate small cohorts. So it would be helpful if you want to enroll. The earlier you enroll, the better it is. That is it, I believe. In case you have any questions, feel free to drop us an email at horizons@ashoka.edu.in. We are fairly prompt on our email ID. And yeah, hoping to see you all this summer with us. Thank you so much for joining and for being such a curious audience and asking a lot of questions. Importantly, thank you, Aditi, Philip, and Aritra, for walking us through all your courses, the outcomes, and how your courses would look like during summer very comprehensively. And yeah, really excited to see you all this summer, with a bunch of curious and ambitious high schoolers. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Yashasvi. We've also posted all of the course links in chat in case you have missed that out. Please do, if you have any more clarifications or any more information, detailed information you need, all of it is available on our website very, very transparently. So please do have a look, and yes, feel free to email us for any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you all.